The last thing that we need to talk about here in relation to birds. So, fertilized eggs. We talked, you guys learned yesterday about birds, their adaptations, and the unfertilized egg. The egg you're probably familiar with that you get at the grocery store. But today we're going to talk about the fertilized egg. So, when birds reproduce, what type of fertilization do they have? No, it's sexual. Internal. Yeah, so they have internal fertilization. So that means the male bird deposits sperm into the female bird's reproductive tract. Those sperm cells make their way to egg cells inside of the female. That's internal fertilization. So that happens inside of the female bird. Once that egg cell is fertilized, then it can start to grow into an embryo. And the other parts of the egg form around that embryo. The yolk and the albumin and the shell and all those other things we talked about yesterday. Okay. So, if we look at the very beginning stages of the fertilized egg, okay. Well, you have the embryo, which is the young. Attached to it is the yolk, which you learned yesterday. What is its function? What does the yolk do? It provides energy for the embryo as it develops. You know, people sometimes say when they're like looking at eggs, say, well, the yolk is the embryo. It's not the embryo. Okay? The yolk is nutrition that as the embryo, if there were one there, grows, it uses that energy from that yolk. The albumin is we would call it the egg white. The liquid part that fills up most of the egg. You have a couple membranes in there. The allantois, and then the amnion, which surrounds the embryo. Those are the parts of a fertilized egg. So the embryo is the actual developing chick, the developing bird. Grows in size as time goes on. This membrane called the allantois. That's where waste that the embryo is releasing goes to be stored and released. The amnion is that membrane that actually surrounds the embryo itself. It's filled with fluid, helps cushion and protect the embryo as it's growing in the egg. So these are the early stages. This is after just 5 days, what a chicken egg might look like. The embryo is still pretty small. The yolk is pretty big. But as time goes on, the embryo grows larger. The yolk starts to get used up as the embryo grows. So if we look at this diagram, this isn't showing the whole egg, it's just showing sort of the embryo and the other attached membranes. So there we have the embryo. Surrounded by that amnion. You have the yolk here. And the allantois up here. What you have are these vessels. The purpose of these vessels is to transport things to and from the embryo. So these yolk membrane vessels, they can carry the nutrients from the yolk into the embryo. These allantoic vessels can carry waste to the allantois from the chick. They can also absorb oxygen. And those are the parts of the fertilized egg. So
Wait.
if you look at this, this just sort of shows a day-by-day kind of overview of how the embryo changes. So again, it's about 21 days for chicken egg to go from being laid to hatching. And we're going to look at some of these parts today. So this is just after a couple days. The embryo starts to be visible.
Looks like shrimp.
Changes over time, limbs start to grow, different parts start to develop at different points in its development. Yeah, the head grows first, and so that's why the eggs look really large at first. So the rest of the body sort of catches up with that.
Hey, my dude.
And now this is 10 days. Start to get feathers, the very first feathers. Now you're about 2 weeks in. So I'm getting closer to hatching. And at the end of its development, it turns towards the air sac. It absorbs all of what was left of the yolk. Okay? It's crowded in there. Basically, after 18 days, the whole inside of the egg is completely taken up by the developing chick. Turns its beak towards the air cell, and then it pecks into that. Again, what does it use the air cell for at first? Its first breath, as it pokes in there and then eventually breaks out. Now,
Can we do a lab?
The eggs we buy at the grocery store that you use to make breakfast, they're unfertilized eggs. And how does the farmer ensure they're not fertilized?
By not letting them out.
Yeah, by keeping the male and female chickens separate. If there's no rooster around, which is what we call male chicken, then obviously the hens can't have those eggs fertilized, but they will still continue to lay eggs. Even if the eggs aren't fertilized, they will lay those eggs, they're not fertilized, and that's what we get at the grocery store. You can buy fertilized eggs, chicken or duck eggs, and in some places they're commonly used as food. Okay? It's called baloo, okay? And it's a fertilized duck or chicken egg still in its shell. Okay? And so you can get them at like a store at the mall.
Express.
Baloo Express, and what you often are eating with vinegar or soy sauce, and basically you break open the shell and there's the embryo in there, okay, and you eat the embryo along with all of the insides of the egg.
And then a chicken hatches.
No, they're dead. They're dead and they're like steamed or cooked. And so you open it up, sort of drink out the liquid part that's in the egg, and then you eat what's left of the embryo and yolk and so forth. And it's a common snack food. Yeah, you eat it. The bones have not calcified, so they're not like hard that you're going to choke on them. You can basically eat the entire thing. Yeah, that's what this video is, from what's inside.
Oh God, not the camera.
That's what a balut looks like.
What's inside?
Wait, what's inside?
I love that. I love what's inside.